Okay, so what we have here is we're going to discuss a little bit more about using the factory service manual to make sure that everything's working right on the ECU. So what I've done is I've turned to the page that has a circuit diagram that shows the ECU and all the wires that goes to it. Now I'm going to test only specific functions here. Not everything. I'm not going to test all the sensors and see if it's getting the right resistance from the water temp sensor as an example. I just want to go through the power and the grounds and the trigger of the ECU for right now. There's a commenter who was wondering about his ECU and how to know if it's working right. And he asked specifically whether or not the injector were getting power. So let's talk about that. The injectors get their power through the EFI relay. And the relay sends power to the injectors, and the injectors are then grounded through the ECU. So I've made notes of the pins that I'm interested in looking at. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is get my test equipment, which is going to be this little light. And I just want to make sure does the light work? So what we're going to do is we're going to go and test this to a power. See if you can see it lighting up in here. You see that thing lighting up?
Yep.
Okay, so I know that the test light works. Okay. Next thing we're going to do, you just stay there. I'm going to turn on the ignition. We now have power to the ignition, which means, yeah. So supposedly the EFI relay clicked on. If the EFI relay clicked on, I should have B plus to the ECU on power 10, and B plus means relative to the ground. So the countdown on this thing is it starts from the bottom left. Count up 10 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's good. That's what we want. All right. That's first test is good. Next thing is I want to see if I have power going through the injectors. Now this is the ground return of the injectors back to the ECU. But what this will test is if the injector is getting the plus through the relay, and if the injector is plugged in and has continuity, it should be returning through these pins, and we should see continuity. And that's what would get ground out. You might even hear them click when I connect the light, because that'll be basically completing the ground circuit that the ECU does when it's actually running. We'll start with 15. Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's confirm 10 again. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Did I count that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I don't know if you heard that click or not, but the injector actually clicked. So 15 is good. 33 is next. All right, this is going to get a little dicey. 33 is going to be third one down. So it starts at 35 from the top. So 35, 34, 33. Listen carefully. You might hear it click. I don't know if you heard that. I don't know if that click was audible or not, but that was the relay actually. That was the injector actually firing. 32, one right below it. So 35, 34, 33, 33 again, 32 again. There's 32, 31, and 30. Those are all the injectors. And at 14, it says 15 and 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Yeah. Those two. So we know that all the injectors are hooked up and are being powered by the EFI. All the ECU has to do to fire those is to ground those connections, just like I did with the light. Let's go back down to the list. we want to see if we have B plus on the trigger pin number 1 of the ECU. That's this blue wire from the ignition coil goes to pin 1. Now when this ignition coil gets grounded by the ignition module, it triggers pin number 1. So right now it's not getting triggered, so you should have power flowing through the coil to pin 1. So do we have power there? Yeah. So we know pin 1's good, and we checked pin 10 was good for power, and we checked all the injectors. So we know everything's working here. The only other thing we ought to do is make sure that the ground connections, these have specific grounds that have to be done. I'll take a pic of that. Right here is a fusible link, and if that's burned out, you'll have a problem because it supplies power from the negative post of the battery through a fusible link, and it grounds to the control unit, to the ECU. So I made note of what pins are supposed to be grounds. Okay, so if that's grounds, like for instance, if we go to pin 5 up, that should be a ground. Now remember, this is a ground, so we should have no light, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing. But if that's supposed to be a ground, we'll connect our test light to the positive lead. Now we have a way to check that out. We're going to check out pin 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we know we have a good ground at pin 5, good ground at pin 35, which I believe is a top lead. Yes, the very top one here. This is a ground up here, ground. Okay. We have 17 and 16. 17 and 16 are, that's 18 at the top, so that's 17 and that's 16. Okay, so what that's proven is the 35 pin connector has grounds and positives and a trigger signal. So with all that working, you can, if the ECU is still not firing at all, it's probably a bad ECU because you've tested everything else that you can test. Now, I'm not going to go through every single test in the book for all the sensors, because that would just take too much time. But basically, if you don't have that, then don't go any further. Okay, you've got to figure out why that would not be the case. Otherwise, there's no way that those injectors are firing if they don't see that ground connection we did, the last connection, and those connections for power to the injectors, and that trigger signal from up here. That's all for now. I hope that will clarify some of the tests you can do with something as simple as a little test light. That's all. Thanks.